Hello, my name is Phyllis Dillon, and I'm pleased to present the next installment of FIT Talks to you. FIT Talks is the oral history program at the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York, New York. Today, December 7th, 2016, we are taping in the FIT library on the campus located at 7th Avenue and 27th Street. Our guest today is Bud Konheim. Mr. Konheim comes from 4 generations of people in the apparel industry and has worked since 1955 in the business. That gives him 61 years of experience. He's worked with his partner, Nicole since 1976, and they have built a successful designer business through many ups and downs of the economy, design upheavals, and changes in the retail landscape. I will ask him some baseline biographical questions and then questions about the changes he has seen and been part of in the fashion scene through the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and aughts until now. Mr. Konheim, who were the first people in your family to come to the United States, and about when did they come?
Late 1800s. It was on my father's, they were both sides that came then, but the ones that went in the apparel business were on my father's side, and they came from Berlin, probably via someplace else before that, and they started down on Grand Street with a push cart, and then, long story, but the big event was moving in, paying rent and getting out of the rain and moving inside, and that was in the 1900s. And then the evolution was, there were jobbers. They'd buy stuff for push cart first, and then inside the rental space next. Then they couldn't find enough stuff to buy, so they started making things, and then that became the manufacturing business. And then they started with the cheap Grand Street, and as we moved uptown, by the time I got into it, I wasn't interested in mass or cheap anymore. I really wanted to do a higher level, and that's a whole story in itself. If we do what Phyllis wants to do here, this is going to be an 8-hour tape.
Well, we'll skip ahead. We'll skip ahead.
Okay.
Basically, you were going to college, and then one summer you worked at Wall Street for a few months, and then later worked in your father's factory. And you've mentioned that you found that work much more exciting. Can you talk about what it was that inspired you?
Phyllis is making a really pretty idea this day. I was suspended from Dartmouth for a semester, and my parents said that was I was a troubled kid. I wasn't troubled. I made trouble. So I was at Dartmouth after a long prep school and incident-heavy education. And so when I came home, my parents said, okay, you obviously don't value your education, so you're going back to school, you're going to pay for it yourself. So I said, okay, so I went to Wall Street. It was the only thing available at the time, $35 a week. But Dartmouth at that time was $800 a semester. So I saved my money, and I had 2 weeks at the end of the summer of working Wall Street that I was finished there, and I still want to make some money, so I asked my father if I could work in his factory for 2 weeks. And Wall Street, watching ticker tapes and other people's businesses and talking about that and the stock prices really got monotonous, and you weren't involved really. But being in the factory, and having everybody talk about what was hot and list great items and this thing's selling well and look at the style of that, all of a sudden that became really exciting to me. And so I went from there. When I got back, went back to school, when I came out of school, then I went back into the fashion business. That was really, and from that time, 1955 till now, I can say I have never had an uninteresting day. Not always good, but never uninteresting, and always a challenge.
Right. So during the 50s, when you entered the business, you were working for your family's
Correct.
firm?
Yeah.
And what What kind of things did they make?
Well, they would make, in those days, they made kind of anything that came along. So what they were known for was children's wear. And because someone asked them to make women's house coats, which is, the French word is robust, and they did that. So it was a crazy combination of a nationally sold children's wear line and a chain store which sold the house coats. Didn't make sense, but in those days the word merchandising didn't exist, so they just did anything.
Right. So then in the 60s, things began to change for you?
What happened was I started working in the factory. I started making cartons. You didn't buy cartons in those days. You had a razor blade, you cut the cartons out of cardboard, taped them up and made boxes. And then to make money, I asked my father if I could go, he had a partner. I said, can I go out and sell on the road for you? Because they said they're not going to pay me a salary because at that point I wasn't worth anything. So I started I've been selling newspapers and door-to-door stuff all my life just to make money. In those days, in the 50s and right after, during the war, in the 40s and the 50s, parents didn't routinely spoil their kids. There were some that did spoil their kids, but no matter how much money you had, the rule wasn't to throw it at your kids because we came out of a tough time of the Depression, and it was just really bad taste to spoil your kids. So I was not, my parents were wealthy, but they didn't give me anything except to go work for it. And that led to me saying, okay, can I go out on the road and can I sell some things? I said, yeah, you can. So I made a cardboard box and I took 5 styles and put them in the box. And I stole my sister's yellow convertible. And she had boyfriends, she wasn't using it anyhow. So I took the car and I put the 5 items in the box and I drove to White Plains. And I parked the car and I looked around in this main square of White Plains to identify some store. And I went to some store on the left and walked in there, and there was a woman eating a sardine sandwich or something at the counter. It was dark, and I didn't even get any further. I said, this is not the kind of store I want to sell. So I walked out and looked for another store, and there was a store called Gray's Tots to Teens on the other side of the square. So when I walked into that store, and with my cardboard box in hand, I said, I'd like to meet the children's wear dress buyer. And there was one guy in the store. And he looked, and there was nobody else in the store, and he looked at me, he said, this must be your first day on the job. I said, not only my first day on the job, you're my first customer. So he said, let's see what you have. And he opened up the box, he said, gee, these things are cute. And he wrote an order. I didn't even know how to write an order at that point. He wrote an order, showed me how to write the order. Okay, and then he said he's finished, and he said, okay, pack up and get out of town. If I find these clothes anyplace else in town, I'm going to go throw ink over all of mine and send them back to you. So as a kid, I said, okay, put the stuff back in the box, go back to the car, and got out of town. Get back that night and I did other business on the way, Mamaroneck and other towns. And I said to my father's partner, he said he was going to throw ink on the clothes when they come in if I sold somebody else in town and send them back. Can he do that? So then that was my first lesson. My father and his partner said, no, he's not going to throw ink on the things. What he's saying is he wants them exclusively. And because that's one of the things, he touts himself on being a specialty store and looking different than anybody else in town. So he doesn't want you to sell the same things to anybody else. That's the point. Okay, it's not about throwing ink on the dress. That's a dramatic way of threatening you to do what he wants you to do. So I said, okay, my first lesson.
Okay.
I went on from there.
You went on from there. And then in the 60s, I know from what you've written that Bloomingdale's was an important marker in your career to some degree.
This is about a 4-hour story, but I'll shorten it to 2 hours. Okay, so the Bloomingdale's in the 60s, Bloomingdale's was the experimental store, department store in town. The real history of this, of department stores in the United States, goes back way before this. It was, the country was founded really on specialty, one made clothes at home, then specialty stores, and then department stores a la Macy's and that type of store, because it was an easy place for people to shop during the day, because they carried many different things that would satisfy everybody and have to run all over town. And the department stores were starting to become really, really big and important sellers of fashion merchandise. And they had no branches then. And so what they did is they had a lot of traffic. And Macy's was the number, well, that was the department store of note in the country. Biggest store in the world is what they advertised at that time, on 34th Street and Broadway, Herald Square. And Bloomingdale's was out of the way. It was kind of a no man's land up on 59th Street and Lexington. But it was the first stop from Queens on the R train, the N train in those days. It was called the BNT. And at that time, in the 60s, it was enough years after the war that all the GIs coming back from the Army needed a place to live, and the L, the train, came over on 59th Street and turned up 3rd Avenue. And so all the stores on 3rd Avenue were really under the L, and there were terrible locations in them. Trains would rattle by, and the dust and everything was float all over the place. But they started taking the L down and started building up all these high-rises for the returning GIs. And so by the 60s, 3rd Avenue represented this brand new spanking apartment houses that were filled up with all these young couples, and it was a booming place. It was like a new frontier. And Bloomingdale's was right there. And so Bloomingdale's responded to the new crowd in town, and they became leaders of fashion-forward stuff. And so Bloomingdale's was the store. If you were in, you want to sell a department store, you're in fashion, selling it to Bloomingdale's was like a mark of credibility. It was a mark of success. And so that I went up to Bloomingdale's with, at that time, there was easy to get a buyer. They didn't have any branches, so you just make a phone call and you get an appointment. And I went up with about 5 or 6 styles again, and the name of the buyer was interesting. How you can remember these things so long ago. The name of the buyer was Frances Lind, and she said, "Come in. What do you have?" I showed her 5 or 6 styles. She says, "These are new, really fresh looking. These are great. I want you to take these clothes and go up to the 7th floor and show them to either vice president or merchandise manager at the time. His name was Mel Jacobs." So I said, "Okay." So in those days I did what I was told. So anyhow, I took the clothes, went up to the 7th floor. She called up and told Mel Jacobs I was coming. Went into Mel Jacobs' office, and I said, Frances Lind said I should show you these clothes. I said, "Great, let me see them. Really interesting, really great. Here, leave them on the couch. Go to the housewares floor and take a look around there on our housewares floor, and then come back and see me." I don't know what the point was, but I did that. I went to the housewares floors, and what were the housewares floors? Now we're talking 60s, talking about all new GIs moving in on 3rd Avenue. Now I'm going to the housewares floors on Bloomingdale's, which is in the center of all that action, of all this new housing. And what did I see? I grew up with white tablecloth and crystal glasses and normal looking place settings. And the housewares floor at Bloomingdale's in that time had yellow placemats with red napkins, with green forks and blue glasses, and I never saw anything like it. And it was all new and exciting and home decorations. Oh my God, this is really something. We go back to Mel Jacobs' office. "What did you see?" I said, I never saw it, it's all new. I said, I don't know, I never saw this type of thing at a dinner table. It's great, it was really great. He says, I want you to make clothes that could sell on the housewares floor. It was a metaphor, but I got it. I got the idea that what he wanted was new and interesting and exciting looking stuff. And Mel Jacobs, he's dead now, but Mel Jacobs was always a new thinker. In all his life, he was a new thinker at retail. So I went back and I decided that what my father and his partner were doing with the designer they had, was old hat and stuck in the past. And they were asking buyers for information, trying to make them happy with a market thing and copying things and things like that. It's not for me. I said, the rest of my life, what I want to do is to do new and exciting things and see what kind of business that's going to be. And so that's what started my appreciation and my interest in new and innovative design as a differentiator. That is what I felt would differentiate me from everybody else. And it would be a selling tool versus price. And so that's where it actually started, was Mel Jacobs pointing me in the right direction at that point. And then it's a long story, but what I kept doing was ramping up the idea of design, ramping up the idea of original design, ramping up the idea of making it all ourselves. So we ended up designing our own fabrics and our own silhouettes and our own everything, our own trim. And that's where it started, was with Mel Jacobs.
Yes, so then your career is focused on a synergy with designers, you know, and merchandising. And but I also found it interesting that you were asked to be a licensee for some French companies, and that you've said that also gave you new ideas because the French idea of fashion was different.
Yeah, I licensed, Daniel Hescher came to me, and Dorothy Bies. Those are two French designers that came to license. I mean, first it was children's wear, and then eventually got into juniors, and then the ladies' wear. Long story. But what Phyllis is talking about is things that how did I get from A to B? Everything that happened, when you tell a story, you'd like to say, I invented this and I invented that. Actually, what happened was, I was an opportunist. When something would come along, like licensing French design, what you did is you got a glimpse of what creative, original design could be. And then you could do it yourself. And so everything became a learning, it became a learning experience. And here I am, every day, I look at it as a learning day. It's a day of school. And believe me, every day, maybe not every day, but damn near every day, there's an opportunity out there, and all I have to do is be open to it and then capitalize on it. So the design, that was one thing. Licensing the French designers was a step up. Working with, there was a buyer at Bloomingdale's named Ida Shalino. She was like probably the smartest buyer of that time for sure, maybe forever. And she was like-minded. She felt her mission in life at Bloomingdale's was to create things that nobody had seen before, that were wearable and great looking on and made everybody happy when they wore them, but absolutely couldn't find them anyplace else. And she would go around in her industry and work everybody she would go into a manufacturer. She told me the story. She would go into a manufacturer and she would open up her order pan and, what do you have? And he would show her what he had. And she'd say, it's just not good enough for Bloomingdale's. She'd close up the order pan and start to walk out. And the guy would get crazy. Wait, what are you doing? What, you gotta stay, show you other stuff. No, it's not right. And she said she would use that to motivate everybody in the industry to come up with new things. So by the time I ran into her, she had found a fabric. This is how I got into going from children's wear into juniors. She had found a fabric that we used in children's wear that was a parachute cloth dyed in navy. It's a crazy piece of fabric. Nobody sampled it in our industry because it didn't look like a traditional fabric. But we did, and I took the navy cloth and I made a little shirt dress with red stitching on it. So it was red stitching on a navy parachute cloth. It was kind of cute. Nothing, you'd fall over about now. But in those days, nobody had parachute cloth. Nobody did red stitching on navy or something. So there it was. She saw that, even though that she was in the junior business, she saw that and called me up. And so that's how we got together. Her name was Ida Shalino. And then I started making junior dresses for her. She was great. And a little short story about Ida Shalino. She was buying a dress line at that time called Youth Guild. Youth Guild was a division of a giant company called, it was David Schwartz's, Jonathan Logan. Youth Guild was a division of Jonathan Logan. They were the biggest, they were like the General Motors, the biggest guys in the industry. And the designer for Youth Guild was making these fabulous dresses, and she showed it and said, this is his simplicity, great stuff, all new, great innovation, and Bloomingdale's is the only store that really sells it because we're the only ones that really understand the stuff, and we have customers coming in, and this is the future. What we're doing now will be all over the country in 3 or 4 years. Great. So I said, great, are you going to build a big business with them? She said, I can't because they're going to fire the designer because it's not a big enough business. And Jonathan Logan is this giant business, and the Youth Guild is a little tiny business. And Dave Schwartz, who was the owner of Jonathan Logan, walked into the designer's office one day and said, listen, you should be a secretary. You're never going to be anything more than a really kind of penny-ante designer. And this stuff is really, they take the things off the mannequin, throw them on the floor, dramatic guy, and said, this is just no good, I'm closing this division and firing you. And so she was out. Her name was Liz Claiborne. And so she left there and went to a little tiny hole in the wall on 40th Street, 80 West 40th Street. How do I know that? Because I was doing business in that building a little while later, and they could never get an elevator because they were busy servicing Liz Claiborne, who was doing so much business they didn't have enough elevators. And I couldn't get upstairs because they were using the elevator. They became the biggest guys in the business, and Jonathan Logan went out of business. So why do I tell you the story? Because that's our industry. Our industry gets populated by successful guys who can't see beyond, they're victims of their own success. They can't see beyond what's made them great, that there's something else. The fashion business is about change. Only they don't think that. The second they get that big, they think the fashion business is repeating what they've just done. No, wrong. So they do that. It's a suicide wish, and that's what he did. And then Liz Claiborne took over. And then what happened is Liz Claiborne herself died, the partners dissipated, and then the business disappeared. I mean, it's still around, but it also, victim of its own success. It got big, and then lost their creative edge, and then nobody cared anymore. So, what was it? I forget what the question was. What was the question?
Well, synergy with designers.
Right.
I mean, you want to tell us about?
So then, hiring designers, that's like, I'm not a designer. Appreciate it, love art, whole life built around that type of creative thing, visual creative. Like I have developed, I don't know if I have innate talent for it, but I developed it. So anyhow, I started, went into the junior business, started hiring designers. And I learned from them. And I learned by making an original line and having it fail and then be successful. And so you get an idea of what you wanted out of the designer. And one of the things that I got to was you want innovation, but you don't want clothes that are crazy. People have to wear them. So they want to be interesting, but they don't want to be outrageous. So there's a balance in the whole thing. So after about experience with about a dozen designers working original stuff, doing just what I said before. I came to a point where I had a very, very hot junior dress line. And the designer's name was Phyllis Walsh. And the name of the company was, I named it after her, was PJ Walsh. So it was on the label. And the second I named it for her, and we put the label out, and we had the order pads done, Phyllis said to me, I'm in love with this guy in Paris, I'm leaving. So I said, oh my God, we just did put the name on the wall, we just spent all this money on changing the name to your name. I'm in love, too bad. So, okay. So I said, how long have I got? She said, I'll give you 6 months. So that was okay. So I started thinking about how do I go and get, we were pretty popular at the time and things were selling well. So how do I go and get a designer that can do original stuff and keep going with this thing and build a business based on what we have? At school, and I'm telling this story because of opportunity and about never losing an opportunity. At school, I was paying attention in class one day. It's a little bit unusual, but I was paying attention. And the economics professor was talking about Western Union. And he was talking about Western Union trying to hire a teletype operator. People watching this video don't know what a teletype is, but it's a clackety-clack machine that prints out sentences and words and transmits them over the wires. And that was Western Union's business, and they were the biggest in the country. And Western Union put out an ad looking for a teletype operator. And the teletype operators from all over came to the Western Union offices. And they all sat around in this room, and the clackety-clack was deafening, all the teletype things going, and all these applicants for this teletype operator job are sitting in this room, and one guy stands up and walks over to the door at the end of the room, opens the door, walks in, and takes the job. Because Western Union wanted to find a teletype operator who absolutely understood Morse code like a second language and was alert. And so here's a guy that understood Morse code, was really alert, and they put down over the clackety-clack noise in the room, anybody who wants this job, come in and get it. And he was the only one who stood up and got it. So I took that lesson and I twisted it to what I needed, which is to find a designer that could be original and do what I wanted a designer to do. So how at those days, how I work with the designers, we would start with fabric, which is the basic way to start designing any kind of piece of clothing. So on the desk, I had a pile of fabrics, about 4 or 5 of them good, most of them bad. And I said, okay, pick out something that we would want to use in the dress business out of this bag that's right for us, our taste level. Some interviews ended right there. Anyhow, some that said they'd pick out something that was really good. Okay, what would you do with it? Well, if they're picking up a piece of Georgette and they say, we're going to make a military field jacket out of it, I said, okay, you don't know what you're doing, so that would end there. If they said, okay, had an idea of what to do, I said, okay, designer's language is not talking. If you find a designer that is snappy talking, probably good snappy talker, not a good designer. So I said, okay, sketch what you want to do there, because that's the language. That's the way a designer communicates is a sketch. If they can't sketch, probably can't do too much of anything else, or they can copy things and they can make, today they can be in business, but they can't do original stuff. They sketch the item that they want to do with that. I would take that paper, and that's what I used to grade the interview. And I went on from there, and I had a dress hanging on the wall behind me. And I would say, in this 20-minute interview, I'd say, okay, this is a dress that was very successful last season. I believe in evolution, not revolution. So show me how you would move what was successful about this dress, how you would evolve that to the next season without repeating it the way it is, because that's boring. but there are elements of this thing that made it successful, and I wanted to see if you know what they are so that you can move forward. So that was another thing. And then I said, but there was also a fit problem with this item. Even though it was successful, we did have a fit problem. Where would you look for a fit problem in that dress? The point of that was, we're making a practical item that has to fit well. So what's the point of making, it's like doing a sketch of a car, no place to put the engine, it has to be practical. So they point out what the fit problems could be, and went on. And so I went through the entire 20-minute interview, covering everything that was important to me, the way I worked with a designer. The last question, which is a serious question, a motivational question. So I said, okay, I had 170 applicants for this job. So I didn't interview all 170, but a good 50 or 60 got to this point. So I said, okay, we at that point we had a successful business, which is why I had all of these applicants. I said, in addition to making more money, what would be a sign of real satisfaction, a real sign of success for you personally in this job? And I had 3 people that gave me the answer that was important to me. The answer is, I want to see people wearing my clothes. That to me was key, because the marketplace was flooded with designers who wanted their name on the label, who wanted credits in the magazine, who wanted to be known in the restaurants so you get a good table, on and on and on, everything except I want to see people wearing my clothes. 3 designers said that, and that came out of me understanding the answer an architect gave once. What do you want to see? I want to see somebody build the building, because a lot of people would buy architects' plans and then file them and never build a building. And architects get off on seeing their building being built. That's really the thrill. Getting paid is great, but seeing your creative work come to reality, that's big time. And so there were 3 designers that answered that way, and I chose Nicole Miller from that group because everything else she did was really equal, good, if not great, and the rest is history. She has proven over the years just to be nonstop creative, always interesting, new and different, and here are the elements that over the years I found. What are we in business for? We wouldn't be in business unless for the fact that we make people feel good. If we make a piece of clothing, it's got to make someone feel good. Nobody's buying anything from us that makes them feel bad. So that's the first thing, is that satisfies all of the business, the interesting, and all of that stuff. They have to have that talent, and she's got that talent. What's the other thing that Nicole has over time that I've kind of realized defines a designer, a real designer? A real designer is invested in change. If she's satisfied, or he or she is satisfied with what they've done, they're finished. There's nothing new. They don't want to do anything else. There's no need to do anything else if they're satisfied. So a real designer is never satisfied. And over the years, I would say, Nicole, every time she does a runway show, she does 2 a year since 1989, every time she does a runway show, puts on this incredibly creative, new direction show from scratch. Takes her 6 months to put the thing together. The second the runway shows, though, she hates it because it's already old news and I don't like it anymore. And that's the motivation to go on. I can do something better. And that goes on non-stop. There's never a time where she can sit back and say, finished, life's work, never do better than that. That never happens. So I see change as the driving force of the entire fashion business, which, think back, it's what makes it so exciting all the time. It's why I go to work excited every day about what's going to happen today, because it's all new. It's all new, and that's the design element. And if Phyllis asked me the next question, is what about the retail element? What about that? Because that's part of our business we're not talking about yet. So ask me.
Yeah, tell us about change in the retail environment.
Okay, so I started in rambling before about the retail business in the department stores. So what happened was basic business model went from the specialty store, which catered to Sally, Jane, Ann, and Sue, and that was, and made some special clothes for them. That was a specialty store, and it grew into a department store and had all these departments. The key word for the department stores in those days, let's take Macy's as an example on 34th Street and Broadway, was they depended on traffic. And they would have, at lunchtime, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in each department, including the clothing, dress department. And they would put out styles, and the best style would be their leading item, would sell out at lunchtime, and they'd reorder more. And that was the business model. Macy's actually developed the test and reorder business model, and we're the first ones, and it grew all over the country, and everybody in every town had a department store that grew based on that idea. And I'm not going to name them all, but they were all across the country. It was Sticksbury and Fuller in St. Louis, it's Filene's and Jordan Marsh in Boston, and Burdine's in Miami, all based on the Macy's model. Then what happened was the inner cities across the country started to deteriorate as people moved. Department stores found that their traffic was diminishing because people weren't there. So they started building branches out in the suburbs. So now, where you had, like fast forward today, instead of Macy's on 34th Street being the only Macy's, there are 1,000 Macy's across the country. I mean, it's taken time to develop. But there's no traffic. Because the second you take all of those retail spots, all those retail spaces, and spread it out all over the place, what you have is trade. You don't have traffic. You have the same women coming back from, let's say they have a branch in Sandusky, Ohio. Sandusky, Ohio, you have Susan, Mary, Jane, and Alice that shop in us for nobody else, because nobody else around. It didn't occur to them that that was the thing, that was a scene, because the business kept getting bigger because it kept opening more branches. Then what happened is the talent that would buy for the traffic, the talent now is buying for these satellites, all these little stores all over the place that had trade, and it was all screwed up because they couldn't decide what to buy for Sandusky, Ohio. They didn't buy the wrong sizes. They'd be all over the place, and there's no face to traffic. You can't say, what does your customer look like if you have traffic? Because it's anybody, it's just traffic. So the specialty stores still were concentrating on trade, completely different idea. And so the trade was Mary, Alice, Jane, and Sue, and they knew exactly what they wanted because they lived in the town. And so they continued to flourish, even in the face of department stores dominating the scene. And this is taking, let's say, 30, 40 years of this evolution. Where we are today, in the last couple of years, is the only thing that the department stores had to offer now that we've come this far is a discount, is a price. And so they can't offer a differentiation because the buyers don't, first of all, no talent in the buyers are trained to look at a spreadsheet that shows all the stores that they have and who needs what and how much. It's a numbers game. And so they buy with this idea that its traffic is going to take it up. They don't have traffic anymore. They don't buy for trade because they don't know about trade. So they're kind of lost. And so the department store bails it out by having a discount the second the thing comes in. You can go to any department store and you will see their calling card is 40% off, and it goes bigger from there. They get to 60 off, 70 off, pretty soon they pay you to take it out of the store. So it's a problem they're faced with right now, and they're dealing with it right now as we speak in 2016, the end of 2016, with deeper discounts. it's not working. They're going to have to find an answer. What is working? What is working is individual attention in the boutiques and e-commerce. What's so good about e-commerce? E-commerce is absolutely the ultimate and especially store idea. They show you the picture, in one picture, not a sea of thousands of others, show you one picture of things. You can flip through the pictures one at a time. You get to see what you want. You get all the information. It's quick. You don't have to go and find someone that will help you check it out. You hit a button and the thing is in your door before you can turn around. So the scene today is one where we've hit the top of the department store development. We're on the other side of it. Players are coming into the business that are very, very successful, taking a lot of trade, like Amazon has their own formula, Zappos has their own formula, a whole bunch of e-commerce sites. All the manufacturers are in business on their own e-commerce sites, like we are, and everybody's taking a piece of the business. And the only thing that remains really strong and growing are the specialty stores, because everybody says, well, you know, the brick and mortar stores will never go away because people like to touch and feel the merchandise. Probably true, but they're going to find a way to do it where it's easy and pleasant, and that becomes a specialty store. So that's why specialty stores are growing. It's not easy and pleasant to do it in a gigantic store that you can't find where you're supposed to go and nobody wants to help you. It's clumsy. So that's what's happened at the retail stores, and I've been through it all. I've seen the incredible rise and fall, and I've dealt with it and in business, doing business with it. But it's an interesting thing. If you were my age, you would walk down Fifth Avenue, you'd start at Bonwood Teller, and you would go down past Tailored Woman, and you'd walk in front of Best & Company, and you'd end up on that side of the avenue at past Arnold Constable and B. Altman, and you'd cross the street and start coming up Fifth Avenue, where there would be Franklin Simon and Oppenheim Collins and stores like that. I've just named some gigantic stores that were nationwide, all out of business, every one of them. And there are more. And the reason is they grew and grew and grew and got gigantic and just could not understand that the customer wants change. They want newness, they want something fresh. And they didn't change with the times. They didn't do it, and they're still not doing it. And so we're at a point where a lot of 330 million people in the United States, most of them wearing clothes, most of them buying clothes, most of them interested in clothes, but they're not finding it. Nobody can believe it. Everybody says, oh, they're interested in price. And then, you're not asking me this question, I'm going to answer it anyhow.
Good.
Another question. This is a question she didn't ask. Phyllis didn't ask me. A pseudoscience that grew up after World War II was demographics and sociology. And there's something to be said for those, I don't want to call them sciences, but those disciplines. There's something to be said for those theories. Because there's enough of an element of truth in the things that you pay attention to them. But be careful. People don't really like to be typed as a whole class, and if you are current to this thing we're showing you, the election of 2016 absolutely paints the entire picture of sociology and demographics. Everybody of a certain skin color votes this way. Everybody that's got a language of, let's say, Hispanic, they vote that way. Everybody who belongs to a country club and wears whale pants, they vote that way. Everybody who's working in a steel mill votes this way. Totally debunked by the election. Say what you want about who did what. The people who made these sweeping sociological judgments that were absolutely so solid that they knew what they were talking about stood dumbfounded at the results because people acted independently. People are more and more independent than you would believe, and they are also herd animals in a certain type. So to put them all together and say you can make one brushstroke that covers everybody's really, really silly. And to go and make judgments based on their education and stuff as it applies to their taste level, you can do it, but you're at risk because the department stores do that. They break up demographics and say, let's see, we have a better department store. We ask with higher price, and we're trying to sell women who have the money. Oh, those are older women. They have, okay, older women, they are out of shape. So what they need is clothing that's out of shape if they're going to pay the price. So they end up making muumuus because that satisfies their demographic, their sociological idea. In 1971, 72, we were in the junior business. And Phil Kelly at Bloomingdale's asked me, could we take two of our junior styles and make them in what was called a Missy fit, which was long-waisted. Junior is short-waisted. So I said, no. I said, I hate Missy's, they're dumb. They make double knit dresses, polyester, that's got to be washable. It's a stupid business. I don't want any part of it. I said, why don't you get the Missy manufacturers to copy two of our styles that are young and put them in their Missy fit, and in fact, none of they hate juniors, they won't do it. That was our industry. There was Missy departments and junior departments, and the two never met. They couldn't stand each other. So in that Christmas time, I was going to an invitation to go on safari in Kenya, way out of touch for 2 weeks. So I said, okay, Phil, take two styles and we'll make them in a Missy fit, which meant take the styles, make them a little longer waisted and a little longer skirt, end of the story, and charge a little bit more for them. Great. So I gave instructions to my mother's vice president. My mother was running a business at the time. I gave instructions to my mother's vice president in charge of production, to Jack. I took two styles, making them for Bloomingdale's. They bought 150 of each style, and they got us another, to fill out the 300-piece cutting, they got us another 150 pieces placed around with what was then called the AMC. It was all of the stores that belonged to the group that Bloomingdale's was in, like Filene's in Boston, like Shillito's and Lazarus, Burdines. So we sent the styles, 150 each, to Bloomingdale's, sent the styles out to those other stores, and I left for my vacation, totally out of touch, telling Jack, close the door, we're not taking a single piece back, all I want is checks. This is not my idea. Okay. Come back after 2 weeks, first thing I say is, tell me something, that thing I asked you to close down, I hope you close down and take anything back. I have no idea what's going on. It's crazy. The things flew out on about the second or third day, they're all gone. They're screaming for more and reorders, and that was the start of what's Nicole Miller today. We're making younger looking styles for older people. Whoa, it doesn't fit the demographic. How can you do something like that? And even as the business grew, what they needed to do, the department stores, all of a sudden, they had to build this idea up because it was so successful. So they needed to get a buyer to this, because what happened originally, it went to a Missy department. So there were Missy departments. There were no other manufacturers doing this type of thing. So she'd go and find people that were doing other things than what she had, and they didn't work because they didn't start out making younger looking styles for older women. Not so older, but older than junior. Next thing you know is the department stores develop a department that they can get a buyer for this to go and encourage manufacturers to do this, and they needed a name, so they called it contemporary. Okay, what does contemporary mean? Who knows? That's what they called it. And they got so busy, absolutely no thinking, so they got a department manager, a buyer to buy the contemporary things. They bought all kinds of stuff that wasn't right, didn't understand the basic idea of what this was. So within 3 years, the idea was contemporary's dead. Those women died? What happened? No, what happened was buyers never got the idea of what they were buying in the first place. So they didn't really have a aesthetic philosophy, so they killed it. And then they said, but it's the older customer again, and so they invented another name called bridge. And so the whole retail scene for about 10 years went on naming different things. It's bridge, it's contemporary, it's better, it's cheaper. My God, nobody ever said, let's buy some beautiful clothes for women to wear. That's what I would say would be a great philosophy. Never. It was bridged, contemporary, priced, all these things that fitted into their idea of slots, because they really didn't understand the business. They had jobs. That's about it. And so that thing became a shambles, and we went on creating the same thing. We kept making younger in attitude clothes for this customer who didn't want to buy. Juniors would be a little bit vulgar after you're a little bit out of college, and if you make older looking stuff, you're on your way to a funeral. So the women didn't want that. And so we did that for a while, and we were successful with the idea. Not every dress was great, but the basic direction was. And then one day, I got a call from Vanessa Castagna, who was at that time the president of JCPenney. And she called me up and she said, we have identified, at JCPenney, we have identified young customers that want a certain kind of style and older customers that want to go to funeral styles or be buried. And we have a missing middle that we're not satisfying. We have all these people that are walking out that we're not satisfying. You guys are understanding that style. You're doing it, but we can't pay your prices. So we have to make it for JC. Would you be interested in doing a sub-label thing for JCPenney so we sell half the families in the United States, and we'd like to put this out there. And that was the start of our involvement with JCPenney. But what it was is them recognizing the need that was out there, was to stop trying to pigeonhole everybody in a preconceived idea of what they would want and say. These styles, the young styles are actually not sexy on an older woman. They're vulgar, because let's say, a woman bends over and she really doesn't want half her rear end falling out of the pants. So, but if you're 14, I guess it's okay. And then if she's 25 or 30, she doesn't want to get a dress that looks like it would be perfect for Grapes of Wrath. So there was something in between, and we satisfied that. So that was how we got into JCPenney, and it's successful today. Not because of each style, but because of the direction and who we're satisfying. It's a real need. Okay. You got another question?
Well, you've spoken a lot about paying attention to the customer, and I assume you have your own specialty stores. What would you tell someone coming into the business now?
Well, you just answered. You gave me the answer in the question. We are customer centric. Why are we doing this? What is this all about? We're actually trying. You come into any place that we're selling, especially wherever it is that we have clothes. We have to give you the idea that you're going to feel good if you buy something from us. You're going to feel good. There's no other reason to buy it. There is absolutely no other reason. I would guarantee I could go to your closet, and I've never seen your closet, and I'll bet I can't get my hand in between the hangers because you have so many clothes. That's the United States of America. But how come people are out buying clothes? They're looking to feel good. So if you're customer-centric, and if you have the idea that you have the ability to make someone feel good with what you're doing, I don't care if you got an ice cream stand, but wearing clothing, if you have the ability to make someone feel good, you could be in business. Because very few people are making anybody else feel good. So you're a winner. If you can do that, people will pay for that. And the definition of how you make someone feel good must be 43 different ways. You either do it with a service, you do it with the clothes, you do it with the aesthetics, you do it how she feels when she puts the clothes on. Nicole did it for me last week. She made a tie for Bobby Kennedy's Riverkeeper Foundation, just to save the Hudson, whatever he's doing. And they had a fundraiser. And he said, I want to give away a tie. Okay, so she made a print with some fish on it. Great. And then she made the tie, and she brought it into my office, and I said, I have one left over, here's yours. Okay, so I said, when was the last time I wore a tie? It's great, but look at the tie. Look how skinny that tie is. That's the whole thing. So is that, yeah, that's it, nothing more. It's not about you can't find a fish on, there's a fish. It's not about the fish, it's about, it's new, it's interesting. And so is it just me that thinks this? No. I went to a book party at Hunter College, 68 in Lexington. I'm checking in. This is the night that she gave me the ties, I put it on. Get up to 68 in Lexington, Hunter College, I'm checking in, the two young women checking in. They look up and say, oh my God, it's a great tie. Wow, big score with just this. And what's so new about this? Skinny.
It's great.
So that's my advice.
Yes, that's a
Make
wonderful
skinny
way
ties.
to end this. Thank you so much, Bud, for this time.
Now, thank you. I get off on how, what's it all about? I really, because here I am, 61 years doing exactly the same thing every day, and I'm excited about the thing, and we're all passionate at the place. We don't have the biggest business in the world, because with my philosophy, you can't have the biggest business in the world. You have a successful business, but it can't be gigantic because you run into yourself and then you're not creative. But I love when people come into the business and they're kind of doing the same thing or trying to do the same thing, because the more people that are trying to make everybody feel good, the more it ramps up the competition, ramps up the idea, ramps up everybody's appreciation for what it is that everybody's doing. So thank you.
You're welcome.